Tēnā koe te tiamana, mo te wā pauri nei. Arā kei te mihi ki a koutou te whānau pani. E moi mai rā a wiki, ki kāhui maunga, haere tonu atu rā. Tēnei te karakia pai marere. Tō tia kina māramatanga e te atoa mō tō tātou kuini Māori me ngā kawe mate. Tai inoa kia mātou katoa o te ahiahi nei ai. Nau te kororia, nau te kororia, nau te kororia, rire, ho, pai marire, rest in peace.
Apologies from Councillor Gaylord. I have a mover and a second. Councillor Saul and Councillor Duthie. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed, none. Let's pass conflicts of interest declarations. None. Very good. No public participation that I've been advised of, which takes us straight to item 4, which is the election of the deputy chair. So there are. Do you want to introduce Francis?
Yes, I can give a brief introduction, Chair. The election of the Deputy Chair paper before you, it's really a two-step process. The first process is for Council to determine the voting system to apply for the election, and these are prescribed in the Local Government Act. Either there's voting system A, which is in essence a progressive voting system, or voting system B, which is first past the post. The key element of voting system A is that would only apply if there were 3 or more candidates, otherwise it would default to voting system B by default. And there's also a process set out for determining by lot in the case of a tie. So the first step is for the council to determine its voting system and then progress into the actual vote itself. If you could take any questions, Chair.
Any questions? I'd like to move recommendation 2. Statutory voting system B in 1 and recommendation 2 as well. Seconder, Councillor Duthie. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed? None. Okay. That moves us to the actual vote. Call for nominations. Councillor Duthie.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Connolly.
Okay.
I'd like to second that.
Seconded by Councillor Johnson. Any other nominations? None? Okay, in that case, can I put...
There's nothing to put, Chair. There's only one nomination.
One nomination. You are it, Councillor Connolly. I wish it were more dramatic than that, but unfortunately it's not. Congratulations. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Question as to whether we've done the minutes.
That's coming after.
Yeah.
That's coming after.
Not in my agenda, but it's okay.
Yeah. So then we have a series of public minutes to sign off, all of which sadly have Councillor Staples' name on them. So the first is item 5 on my audit paper, which is the public minutes of the council meeting on the 2nd of April 2026. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Gabriel, Councillor Saul. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed, none. Paper passed. Thank you. 6 is public excluded minutes of the council meeting on Thursday, the 2nd of April 2026. A mover and a seconder for those. Councillor James and Councillor Connolly. Councillor Duthie. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed, none. Paper passed. Paper 7 is the public minutes of the council meeting on the 7th of May 2026. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Macarini, and somebody on this side, Councillor Saw. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed, none. Okay, passed. That takes us to paper 8, which is the amendments to the terms of reference to the Te Reti o Waitangi Committee. Do we have officers for that?
It's your paper, Chair.
Oh, okay, very good. So the paper makes some amendments to the terms of reference and revokes the revokes two positions: the position of chair, which I had said that I would be in temporarily, and the position of deputy chair, which is currently Councillor Macarini, and then it appoints Councillor Macarini as chair of the Te Reti o Waitangi Committee. Not sure if you've got any questions in relation to the paper. If there, sorry.
At one stage, we had a discussion about the potential to provide for co-chairs.
Yeah.
Where did that conversation get to?
So that that conversation seems to have been settled out by the iwi. I'll have to be corrected if it's unanimously, but the iwi collectively agreeing that that wasn't something that they wanted to take up. Tanya, is there a more fulsome explanation from the discussions you've had?
Yeah, just following on from our workshop too last week, is that mana whenua representatives were neither, I guess, here or there about the position of a co-chair or deputy chair, but would leave it into the hands of Greater Wellington Regional Council. Aye.
So there's a potential for us to revisit that in the future, but at this stage it seems to be fine as it is. Okay.
Does that effectively leave this committee without a deputy chair?
So the terms of reference provide for the mana whenua members to appoint, to nominate somebody, but this paper can't do that. So that will be that will be confirmed once we've got the committee fully established. Okay, do I have a mover and a seconder for this paper? Councillor Saw and Councillor James. Any discussion? No? All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed? None? You're at second one today, Councillor Macarini. Congratulations. That takes us to the paper 9, which is the feedback on the draft annual plan 2026-27 and the budget finalisation. Now, one thing to say before we get into this is that there is a replacement recommendation for recommendation 2. That will come up on the screen in due course, and a gap will be filled in based on the decisions that we make as a council in relation to where we are going to sit on the rating. So just be conscious of that as we set out. So, okay, so recommendation 2 has been amended on the screen, and you'll see it says agrees that scenario X basically, and that is what we will need to be agreeing on. Now, what I'm going to propose is that we get a brief presentation first, then we have a discussion or questions around anything that's arisen. I'd like to then get to a position where we just move the position that we've collectively landed on, rather than sort of battling out with a recommendation that goes backwards and forwards. Sophia, Tyler?
Kia ora. Thank you, Chair. This report brings together the outcome of the public engagement that we've done on the proposed 26-27 annual plan, and it talks about a set of cost pressures that have emerged since we've started that engagement process. On the engagement, our feedback was modest and consistent with recent years. The key message was, of course, concern about affordability and rates. Alongside that, there was clear support for core services, particularly public transport and environmental outcomes. Overall, the feedback supports the balance already reflected in the proposed plan, and officers do not recommend any changes to the service level or the work program as proposed. The second part of the report focuses on emerging cost pressures. I have both Sophia, head of strategy and performance, and our group manager, finance and risk, here to talk a little bit more about that with you. There are a number of pressures that have arisen. Many of them are uncertain and driven by external factors. Not all of these can be fully mitigated at this stage, but the document we now have in front of you provides some more numbers and a little bit more information around it. Council is therefore being asked to provide direction on how these pressures should be managed. In summary, no changes are recommended as a result of the engagement, and decisions are now needed on these cost pressures so that officers can reflect those and complete the plan, which is scheduled to come to you for adoption on 25 of June. I'll hand you over to Ali, our group manager, finance and risk.
Ali, you're going to take us through this
Yes.
sheet? Okay.
Well, kia ora koutou. Firstly, apologise that you're getting this on the day of the meeting. It has also been emailed to you, but you're aware that things have been happening on the fly economically and have taken us quite some time to work through the numbers in that case. The first thing, I'll start with the positive. On the flip side of your document is the savings. So we have got some offset for the cost pressures that we've got happening on. One of the top one, the airport service, that is claiming it from NZTA. Now this is actually happening now, but we have realised that it was never put into the LTP, so we're now putting it in to adjust the rates in PT for next annual plan year. There have also been adjustments in capital programs, and due to the silver lining of lower capital delivery this year, we also have much lower balances than we originally predicted when we did the annual plan interest and principal repayment numbers, and that is causing the other savings. As you can see, a bit of that is a Metlink, which will offset some of the Metlink cost increases, which we have got on the other page when we get to it, and some of it is in Riverlink. So some of this, of course, is timing, but that does help us in the short term with our repayments. So flipping to the bad news, always good to start with the good news first. Let's look at the scenarios last. We do also have in the PT area some recommended changes to the budgets, which are putting upward pressure on the rates. One is the fare revenue forecast due to patronage changes that have been happening since we did the assumptions for the annual plan. And the other one is for the PT network optimisations, savings that came through the workshops for 4 million can't be realised in time for the annual plan because of contract commitments. I'm just going to pause on that one and hoping that if you have more questions that Tim and his team can answer. Tim is standing in for Sam today. Did you have any more questions on that?
Great.
A question on the patronage one. I anticipate that we set our patronage forecast for the annual plan before the oil crisis.
Yes.
And that since the oil crisis, patronage has been increasing.
Yes, but only
So
just up to touching budget levels. So before that, it was significantly lower. So we no longer think we can meet the target that was set for the annual plan. So it's still reducing and based on what we know now.
So it's healthier than it was, but it's still in
Still
net.
not healthy enough.
Still
Yeah.
needs
Yes.
to be adjusted. Thank you.
Sarah?
Yeah, the PT network optimisations, which are mainly bus optimisations, aren't they?
No, it's actually rail mostly.
Is that
I
okay?
can talk to that.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's a bit of both. We've obviously got a bus optimisation workshop on the 2nd of June, but we also considered reducing capacity on some of our services. That's turning out to be contractually very complex at the moment, so we don't believe next year those savings will be realisable. However, there will be some small savings associated with bus optimisation that will most likely be driven through the procurement process for the buses, and that will be brought to Council on the 2nd of June.
Will we do some work in advance of these contracts just to understand where we'd like to be when we get a chance to look at the rail?
I think yes. I think as part of the long-term planning process, we need to start a discussion about what the growth might look like going forward and what optimisation might also look like. So we will have these discussions probably kicking off on the 2nd of June, and we'll probably carry on through till about December as part of the LTP process.
So just to be 100% clear, that's for rail and bus, not just the bus.
So you'll have a specific workshop on the 2nd of June on bus optimisation, but we'll also start talking about future capacity of the public transport network on the 4th of June as well, which is more a wider strategic discussion as well.
When will we be starting to talk about rail optimisation?
I think as part of the long-term planning process, we will talk about the capacity of the entirety of the network, so we can kick off that discussion on the 4th, but we can certainly have a more detailed discussion when Council returns in August.
In August, okay,
if that
thank you.
makes sense.
Councillor Johnson, then Councillor Duthie.
This morning's Dominion said NZTA was actually pulling out of some of the capital projects. How has that affected us, or does it affect us?
Through you, the Chair, that was quite an old article. So as part of the last National Land Transport Fund, we essentially didn't get any new funding for investments. It's the old one, yeah. So we're literally just starting the process now for the new one going forward. We even didn't get funding for some of our initiatives that were indicated in the GPS as well. So we're a little bit disappointed, but it's a new day, thankfully.
Okay, Councillor Duthie.
Thank you. The network optimisations and I guess the fair revenue forecast, when we set those initially, they were effectively a trade-off against fare increases. Here they're being absorbed into a rates increase. What will we also consider increasing fares to cover these, or could we, or have we already made that decision and therefore we can't for a year? How does the fares and rates aspect of this apply?
Through you, Chair, obviously it's a combination of all three. It's a combination of rates, fares and funding through NZTA that obviously they're all sort of symbiotic on each other. The fares was as a result of the declining rail patronage. We had forecasted for the remainder of the train to remain stable. It has stabilised thanks to the current environment we find ourselves in, but we've still dropped a couple of million below where we wanted to be. That's not saying it could potentially recover if the oil shocks continue, but at this stage, that's the best guess estimate that says we're about $2 million under for next year. In terms of revenues and rates impacts, well, every I think it's $3 million we make in fares, I think has around about a 1% rates impact. And there's also the considerations around what NZTA may or may not pay that can impact that as well. So it's hard to say, everything's dependent on each other, but generally about $3 million worth of fares equals 1% rates. But really important to note, we have increased the average price of fares quite drastically in the last 24 months. And we know that the further we keep going, there'll be a much greater demand response when the oil price starts dropping. So just something to bear in mind, I guess.
Councillor Connolly.
Just digging into the PT network optimisations. So we have a couple of challenges. What I'm hearing from you is that making optimisations in the rail space is particularly difficult, and we need quite a large lead-in time because of various contractual obligations that we have in that space that make it difficult to do things quickly. We have more luck making agile changes in the bus space, but we anticipated a higher level of savings than we're going to be able to deliver. But what we are going to deliver, we're already delivering some bus optimisation savings that we found through the Tranche 1 procurement process. And on the 2nd of July, we'll be discussing further bus optimisations that will be included in the tranche 2 optimisations. Have all those savings been accounted for already, or is that what that figure represents, albeit not the 4 million that we were hoping we'd be able to achieve?
Through you, the chair, it's really just about timing. So the presentation in front of you today is for the annual plan for next year, whereas the majority of those savings, as discussed, and I think that's the forum that we will explore those potential savings, will be part of the LTP and the transport bus contract procurement.
I guess my question was, we've already brought in some of the changes that were indicated through tranche 1 early. We haven't had to wait for the tranche 1 procurement to be tendered. So will there be an opportunity to do the same thing for tranche 2, and will we actually potentially be able to realise some of those savings earlier, i.e. in this financial year?
Through you, the chair, a bit of a cop-out perhaps, but I think it's probably a very good thing to workshop through on the 2nd of June. Obviously, we'll have the experts in the room that can give you indications about what might be doable earlier. I don't think I can answer that question.
Councillor Free.
Given that it's the rail patronage that's declining, and the rail is, where the leaking is of money, can you reassure me again that we'll be looking at rail optimisation? I think you said in August. Like actually looking at what services make sense and what doesn't make sense.
Through you, the chair, I think some of the recent events probably have made that decline, that a significant percentage of that decline has been arrested. So I think we are seeing an upward trend in patronage on rail at the moment. Whether it's enough to get us back to where we hoped to be about 12 months ago, I guess that's yet to be found. But we can talk about the capacity yes, we can definitely talk about rail capacity in August, noting that we do have contractual constraints with our rail operator Transdev, and that it may be quite contractually difficult to realise some of those savings. But yes, we can definitely have a discussion on that in August.
Following up on that, when do these contractual arrangements free up so that something could be changed?
As part of the transport services procurement process, there will be engagement coming up with council on the rail contracts. I think is it looking at least 31? 2031 is the end of the current contract. Yeah.
2031.
Thanks, Lisa.
If I could note for you that these two increases are slightly more than offset by the savings on the other side. So to give you some reassurance in the process of setting the rates. And if we underset the rates, obviously I'll be coming to talk to you later in the next financial year, looking for funding to fill a hole, which basically the only alternative is normally debt. So you may have an aversion to increasing the rates at this point, but there's still a price to pay, and ratepayers pay for the interest and principal on that short-term debt that we would need to take for filling an OPEX hole.
Okay.
Do you want to move on? The same, of course, applies to the diesel price. So now we come to the diesel price scenarios. So we have, starting with scenario 4, one of the options, of course, is to do nothing and assume that everything is going to return to the prices which we established the annual plan assumptions on. This is up to you, so I want you to think about this. Scenario 3 is assuming that they're going to stay high with diesel around $3.20 a litre for the first half of the financial year, so through to December 26. And then going up the page, scenario 2 is the same assumption for a full year. And scenario 1 is a much worse case scenario of prices around $3.80 a litre for a full year. So this is not exhaustive. We can do all sorts of things in between, but we thought it was better to just have a look at a few options to understand the rates impact. We are assuming here that the difference would be covered by NZTA and in a normal 51% FAR rate.
Can I come to you in a second, Quentin? Can I ask Ali, if we adopted scenario 1 and then we found that we'd overcooked it, what happens to the overcooking?
Okay, assuming there is a surplus overall, so if there is cost pressures somewhere else, it would get absorbed into that rate number would be used to fund whatever was needed during the course of the year in public transport, because they have a targeted rate, so it all sits in one bucket. If there ended up being a surplus, they carry their own reserves, and surplus is put into those reserves for future use.
Okay. Councillor Duffy.
That was my initial question. I'll move to a second one. So the government has indicated that support may be available for the diesel price cost pressures. Are we assuming that do we have any certainty on what that means? And would it just be a FAR contribution, or could it effectively be covering it? They also, actually to add, the Minister of Finance publicly stated that fares would not rise in response to the oil crisis. But rates are going to rise in response to the oil crisis. So what is the government's position here? Or do they not have one? Are we left to suck it up?
Through the chair, look, there's been an incredible amount of correspondence over the last month between ourselves and the government through NZTA. So we've provided a lot of information on what our costs are and what some of our challenges are, including our fares situation. So they've been very receptive to that information. I believe there is a decision to be made, potentially by central government, and when that decision will be made, I'm not entirely sure. But there has been a lot of correspondence, and we are expecting to hear something back fairly shortly. But we don't know whether we will get funded, or if we do get funded, whether it'll be 100% FAR or 51% FAR. We just don't know at this stage.
Councillor Elder.
I'm just looking at these different scenarios. They're quite clearly structural, permanent rate increases in response to a temporary and uncertain situation around fuel pricing. Do we not have a more flexible opportunity to adjust to the fuel prices as they go, rather than put a permanent structural increase upon ratepayers?
It would be just for this year until we could determine the next financial year, until we could determine what was happening with fuel. We could adjust the rates again the following year. But otherwise, we would probably end up at the end of the year, if we did have an overspend in diesel, we would probably end up debt funding it.
You have a supplementary, Councillor Elder? No. Any other questions in relation to this paper? No. Okay.
Through your chair, could I just note the rates increase impacts on the bottom of the second page? So the scenario 1 would take rates to over 11%. This might also help sharpen your thinking about what you think about the scenarios. Scenario 2 to 10.41, scenario 3 to 9.95. Remembering we've got the offsetting for all of these and the decreases. In scenario 4 with none, there's actually would be a small decrease in the current rates due to the savings.
Okay, Councillor Johnson, and then Councillor Duffy.
I'm really uncomfortable about, despite the diesel situation, I'm well aware of exactly where we are and the government's indecisiveness, but I feel really uncomfortable about going out with any further rates increase. I can see what the public feedback is like at the moment. And so really what I want to know is, have we sort of looked at any other options, including deferment, things that are not going to make the boat go faster, but might keep us on an even keel?
Tim and I will try and answer that, but given we've got other upward cost pressures in public transport already, given we've already got done the savings round, I think not in the short term, although the public transport team and Metlick always work to minimise costs through the year as we go. But Tim, you might want to make a comment.
Yeah, it's very challenging just based on the structure of the way that we have long-term commercial contracts and commercial commitments. To vary the service levels is something that's contractually not permissible for most of our contracts, and that's incredibly challenging. About 80% of all our costs come through fixed price contracts, and They're not necessarily fixed because they're also indexed against the cost of diesel, amongst other things. So it's an incredibly challenging environment, and for wholesale network changes that could have significant service impacts, we'll obviously need to go through a public consultation process as well as commercial negotiations. So pulling a lever is incredibly challenging. However, this council has made some considerable savings through reducing our growth levels. So we've effectively agreed to no more growth buses. We've also agreed to slow down our decarbonisation program of getting new EV vehicles. So those decisions have already been made, and unfortunately we're at the point now where we're basically up against fixed contracts with not a lot of flexibility.
Or can I ask a supplementary? I wasn't actually meaning cuts for public transport. I was thinking, do we need to think more broadly in order to lessen the impact? Is there anywhere else we can look? I wasn't specifically meaning transport.
For the annual plan this year, we have run out of time to do a lot more work in terms of getting it across the line, but noting we did bring savings through the ELT process for across the organisation, and there were significant savings in environment and Metlink in that process.
Look, I think Ali's answer is correct one. It's a fair question. The process to get to this point of the annual plan, we provided a number of workshops where we made a series of trade-offs that you guys decided on in terms of where you were comfortable with. Some of those savings were taken up and accepted, some of them were not, and we ended up with the 9.7 that we went out and draft. We clearly have to go through another process of the long-term plan, but in terms of going back into the business as a whole at this point in time in the annual plan process to look for more, that would just not work in terms of the simple timing. Well, A, on what we consulted on, but then the timing pressures to actually adopt a draft or the final LT plan with the full budget. We obviously have opportunities in the long-term plan, which is we're about to finish this one off, and we start planning again straight away. So the issue is not gone. We're highly aware of that as staff and the organisation, but I think it is very difficult to do that at this point in time for this annual plan.
Hang on a sec. We've got Councillor Connolly, then Councillor Free, then Councillor Duthie.
What are the implications / obligations in regards to audit of making these increases now? Will they, like if we went with scenario 1, which assumes that 3.8 litre cost, like will they question our assumptions, or are they just going to kind of sign off based on what we say where we say our diesel assumptions are sitting? Or will they say, how did you come up with that 3.8 figure? That's ridiculous, etc., etc.
Annual plans are not audited. So long-term plans are, audit will not be taking an interest in this until we report actuals against it during the year.
I guess though, then if we have made an assumption that is overstated, will they question that if it turns out to be not the case at the end of the year?
I don't believe so.
Okay, Councillor Free.
Yeah, so I'm just interested in these contracts. So, for example, the contract's not terribly flexible from our point of view, but we need to pay more money if the fuel costs go up. How does it actually work? Are we liable to pay the increase for the fuel because we pay for the fuel with the contracts?
Through you, the Chair, yes. So there's a contractually agreed indices that's actually managed by NZTA around what the price of bus service contracts will be. And one of the key indices is something we call the diesel index, and that has a significant proportion on the cost of the overall service contracts. The diesel index is reported by NZTA. It's now getting updated monthly, and if the indices for diesel goes up, which it's gone up by nearly 90% in the last 6 weeks, that cost is passed on through our service contracts, which we're billed for a month in arrears. So that's the way it gets passed through through a diesel index.
I see. Right now, I had a quick look on the diesel prices under $3, but we're looking at prices, assuming prices stay substantially more than that for these ones that have an increase in rates. How volatile do you think it is, and what sort of probability have you got? Crystal ball.
Through you this year, I used to be in trading for petroleum products, so if I knew the answer to that, I'd be a very rich person.
No, I understand that.
But no, the volatility's been high. The governance asked us to forecast what the impact would be at $3.80, so they clearly believe that $3.80 for the next 12 months was a possibility. But at the same time, who knows? Could be all over next week, so hard to tell.
And there's no ability for us to amend the services that we're asking to be delivered because it's costing us more.
No, so we can't scale our services. The contracts are essentially assigned to a fixed service provision. So significant scalability for the cost that we're currently seeing is just not possible in the timeframes.
It does rather seem like we take all the risk. But anyway, thank you.
Councillor Duthie.
Thank you. Might our choice of scenario have any bearing on the government's position? As in, if we were to choose scenario 1, we are effectively budgeting for the highest increased cost, and the government might turn around and say, well, you've adjusted your budgets, you've covered it, there is nothing for us to support you with. Whereas if we chose scenario 4, we would be carrying a deficit through the year that we will obviously need to be filled. Would that make any material difference in negotiations with NZTA or political discussions at cabinet level, as far as you know, Tim?
Through you, the chair. Look, whatever NZTA, I had a meeting with NZTA yesterday on this, and whatever NZTA does, they'll need to be nationally consistent. So whatever they offer the other PTAs, they'll offer us. So I suspect this decision today is somewhat independent. And if there is any policy or statement that comes through in the next week or so, it will be consistent across New Zealand, and probably what we do here won't be terribly important to that.
Councillor Elder.
So scenarios 1 through 3 are asking for ratepayers to basically subsidise public transport fares for public transport users, noting that in the commercial world, couriers, transporters, airlines, etc., have fuel surcharges, additional levies. Do we have any scope to put short-term fare increases upon the passengers?
I'm not sure about the legality of that.
Yeah, so it's a through you, the chair. It's a fair enough question, one that we have considered. There's a couple of other things to consider. The first of all is we have increased the average fare by about 35% over the last 2 years. Most of it comes to the off-peak discount reduction. It's not so much the peak fare increase. So we're already putting quite a lot of cost back. The second one is it's the eligibility of the fare system. It does take time to change, does time to update various tables. We need to let the bus drivers and train conductors know what the cash prices are. So there is a bit of a systems cost associated with it. So while theoretically it might be possible to change fares on a month-by-month basis, there'll be quite a lot of administrative burden. And the third part is we know that a number of our customers are struggling with the cost of living crisis out there, and they do like the certainty of knowing how much it's going to cost in the weekly budget to get them to and from work. And obviously we lose that ability if we start flexing the price of fares as well. So I think that there's arguments for and there's arguments against, but it's theoretically possible, but quite challenging, I'd say, that approach.
Okay. Any final questions? Right. So we now get to the point where we've sort of really got to make a decision around scenarios 1, 2, 3, and 4. It might be worth us just going around the table to get a sense of that. I can tell you that I'm sort of sitting in the scenario 2 sort of end of things. That feels like it's more a little bit closer to the diesel price that we can see at the pump. But none of us have a crystal ball, so we don't know whether it's going to get worse or whether it's going to get better. But it just feels a little bit more realistic than scenario 1 or certainly scenario 4. Just seeking expert advice from Francis. So potentially a way to do this is if people generally are supportive of, if there's an alternative to scenario 2, it would be good for somebody to step forward and say that they do think that there's an alternative scenario worth arguing for. Sarah?
Yeah, I personally favour scenario 3. I think when you add up the contributions, the increases, it's a little bit of an increase when you take the savings into account. I do think we can't rescue the situation completely by charging ratepayers more. I think we need to actually maybe anticipate it a little bit, but also wait and see what happens. And there are other ways I think that we could find the budget shortfall by looking at our budget again. There are things that we do that might not happen. It's always the case that we tend to be more ambitious about what we can deliver than what really happens. So I favour scenario 3, and when you add that up, the total costs, the other cost comes to 1.53%, which is more reasonably offset by the 1.28% of savings, leaving a 0.25% net increase. That is certainly my preferred position.
Okay, so a way forward here is for me to move scenario 2, and if that fails, Sarah, then for you to move scenario 3, if people are comfortable with that. So I'd be seeking a seconder for scenario 2. Councillor Connolly?
Question.
Yeah.
Have we completed questions on the rest of this item? Are we moving into debate now?
No, we haven't. We've just really focused on the sheet. Do you want to? Shall we do that first? Then, if you've got questions.
Well, maybe we could resolve this and then come back.
No, let's deal with all the questions, because those questions that you've still got are inside this paper.
Okay.
Yeah.
At the moment, I just checked briefly on the fuel prices, and at the moment, you can get diesel from anywhere from $2.60 to $3, depending on where in Wellington. So I kind of do wonder if this is going to be quite a fluctuating situation, and whether there's also ways that we could look to purchase fuel a bit more at a better price.
Do you want to respond on that?
Yeah, through you, the chair, we don't really have too much control of the price that our operators pay for their diesel. That's obviously a cost that they incur. We simply get charged through our service contracts based on our indexation methodology that's provided through NZTA. So in a way, if the operators do find savings through their supply chains, then that's something they get to keep, and if they can't, then that's a cost they need to carry.
Councillor Collins?
So I was putting my hand up to second option 2, but I do have a question that's related to the paper and unrelated to diesel, if I could ask that now. It was a bit tricky finding the submissions. They were kind of sent out in a couple of lots, and I was a bit challenged at what I was looking at, but I found it eventually. It was disappointing that we didn't get more submissions, but the submissions that we did get, the actual written submissions, were quite good and thoughtful, and I'm wondering what the process of going back to those people is in terms of when they've raised specific questions, if we can actually answer that.
Through the chair, absolutely. We commit to returning back to each of the submitters that we have contact information received for. Typically, I believe there's 4 letters that I suspect you're referencing, and we do have contact information for those submitters. Following the meeting today, we'll be compiling some information for them, bespoke responses, and going back to all of those submitters.
There were a couple that various councillors might particularly be interested in, including some thoughts in those reply letters, so maybe you can loop us in.
Through the chair, absolutely.
Councillor Duthie, then Councillor Johnson.
On a similar vein, I was also impressed with the quality of feedback, even if the numbers were small. And so with my Environment and Climate Committee hat on, I guess I had 2 questions. One was there were quite a few and very substantive bits of feedback on environment and climate initiatives in support of our work there, and opposing or disagreeing with our decisions to cut or trim those. Which of those line items that we had proposed to reduce, did officers have a close look at in terms of the value to cost trade-off in light of the public feedback?
If I understand your question right, through the chair, through the process that we did for the savings and efficiencies for the annual plan, we went very deep into the information with SMEs and officers and through our executive team. Once we've come back and reviewed the feedback, we have not done a line by line of matching every piece of feedback to a line in the budget, essentially. However, because the feedback sample is so small, we don't feel that it's a large enough sample to have put enough weight to make a change to the plan.
Second question.
Yeah.
The most recent Environment and Climate Committee made a recommendation to Council to reconsider the marine biosecurity function, which is mentioned in one of the paragraphs in the report. What is the advice from officers in terms of the benefit and the cost of doing that for us to actually consider in this meeting?
Through the chair, in terms of the marine biosecurity role, initially we had deferred 100K that was assigned to this role as part of the 26-27 annual plan considerations. So based on the decision from the Climate Committee, Environment and Climate Committee, it is about reinstating the funding for this role. This was a particular marine biosecurity role that would have focused on education and engagement with boaties, particularly on marine pests. Given the RPMP discussion and bringing in marine pests more into the next RPMP, we would also be looking to recruit for this specialist expertise that we don't currently hold at the council. So if through this process you agree to include this back in to the annual plan, then we will be recruiting for those expertise.
So just to clarify, if this meeting decides to stay as we are, then that role will not be recruited in the next financial year, but might be next.
Through your chair, no, we can put it in the annual plan, and there are enough savings. I've been talking to the business partner in this space. We can make this happen within the current envelope.
Okay, at what's the trade-off? Because money doesn't grow on trees. Well, maybe it does for you, Ali. But, what are we not doing in order to magically make 100,000 appear?
We think there will be some surplus in the overall environment group next year that we could use for that.
Okay, may I just clarify? So that's going to happen anyway, is that what you're saying? And therefore we don't need to consider it here because it's already been decided to happen through reprioritisation?
By the ELT, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, I'm going to go back to diesel, and excuse me if I'm asking dumb questions. My understanding is that the operators are commercial operators. Is that correct? If I'm a commercial tradesman and my costs go up, I either pass it on to my clients or I absorb some of the cost. Is it possible that our commercial operators, because I guess they're not doing it for funds and giggles, they're actually doing it to make some money, could they take some of the risk? Yeah.
Through you.
No. Fair question.
No, it's a fair question. The contracts and I think this will be probably a level of detail that we probably went through with the last council. There's indexation clauses that are set right at the beginning of the contract. So right at the moment when we're going out to procurement for new service contracts, we will make it really clear what the indexation clauses are. So they'll take into account the cost of diesel, inflation, and labour are generally the three biggest indexations that we use. So there's a contractually set right at the beginning of, even before the contracts start and are awarded, they're set and negotiated on. and that's so that the operators can understand the risks associated with the contract, and they can price those risks in accordingly. So if we had more flexible arrangements, then we'd probably find higher price contracts from the outset. So it can be changed, but generally they're mostly locked in right at the beginning.
Further questions on the paper as a whole? No, okay. So we'll come back to the moving of the paper. I'm proposing to move, I am moving scenario 2 in recommendation 2, and I have a seconder in Councillor Connolly. And if that motion fails, then we'll move to the second motion, which will be coming from Councillor Free. I don't propose to speak to the paper myself. I think we've had a good conversation about this. Councillor Connolly, do you wish to say anything? Any other councillors wish to speak to the paper? Quentin.
So I'd like to speak in support of scenario 2 on the basis that if the oil price situation was to go away, any excess rated funds would go into a PT reserve, which is highly depleted and would effectively offset rates pressures in future. I mean, we can choose what we use for that, but the money is not sort of magically spent. It sits there for public transport when it's needed. I'd also just like to very briefly acknowledge those who did give feedback on our annual plan. I was actually impressed by the quality of many of the feedback items and the reassurance that comes from Greater Wellington being affirmed for its work on key public services like public transport, like environmental work, like climate change. That was heartening to hear, alongside the reality of the need to keep rates as affordable as possible in a cost of living context. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Saul and Councillor Elder.
I just wanted to speak in support of the motion as well, but also to support Councillor Duthie's comments around the submissions received from the public, as well as some of the sessions organised by staff here, and that those conversations helped our community to understand the scenarios that we're in as well, and I guess the thoughtfulness with engaging with some of the issues we have to face. I also wanted to acknowledge and I guess be assured by the analysis and the advice provided by our officers around some of the trade-offs we've had to make through this process. We've gone through these exercises, I think, just about as soon as we were elected, to have a look at the interactions between where we peg rates and what that means for levels of service, not only immediately, but in the long term, of what some of the activities we want to deliver around our region. And that includes our pest eradication, some of the work on our coastal marine environments, our regional parks, as well as public transport. So just wanted to make note of that. Additionally, the cost pressures that come from public transport are not necessarily things, as we've found out, that are in our control. They are by our part funder, NZTA. They're also by the virtue of the legislative environment we work in, which is, for the bus contracts and the train contracts, the previous public transport operating model. And that is thankfully changing with the first tranche of bus contracts and the consequent tranche 2 and the rail contracts as well. And also just to acknowledge the rigour and interest that this table has around these figures and what that means for our community. I know that we're not making this decision very lightly, but I do support the scenario 2 on the basis that I have assurance from the advice we've had from our staff.
Thank you, Councillor Saw. Councillor Elder, then Councillor Rhodes.
I would like to speak against scenario 2. I think imposing a structural increase of 12 months is far too long given the scenario. We know from fairly recent previous situations that prices spike and then over time taper off. I would suggest that scenario 3 is much more realistic, tapering off over the next 6 months. More importantly, scenario 2 imposes a rate increase of almost 1%, and that takes it up over a 10% annual increase. That's psychologically very damaging to ratepayers. They see an extra 10%, the number 10 on their rates bill. That is going to hurt. Let's go with scenario 3. Scenario 3.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rhodes.
Thank you. What happens if the government, excuse me, NZTA approves some extra funding? If we approve it, scenario 2, which gives us a big windfall, will NZTA kind of refuse to hand us over any money based on the fact we've already kind of accommodated the fuel crisis, effect on the organisation?
Tim, do you want to answer that question?
Well, Tim kind of touched on that, Councillor. I think Tim's response was NZTA will need to look at a national solution, and the decision you make around this table probably won't be influential on how they land that and any consequence for us in a national solution. If you did go for a higher scenario, and as Ali mentioned, and we kind of had surplus funds, that would simply go into a public transport reserve at the end of the year. The other thing I'd say, and it was another question that was raised earlier on, is that this is like an annual, this would be for next year's annual plan. It doesn't lock in, which I think was your question, Councillor Elder, it doesn't lock in a perpetual increase. It locks in a 1-year increase, wherever you land.
Okay, any final speakers to this motion? Okay, so scenario 2 is on the table. All those in favour of recommendations 1 to sorry.
Are you going to take the motions one by one?
I can take them one by one. All those in favour of recommendation 1, please say aye. Those opposed? None. All those in favour of recommendation 2, please say aye. With scenario 2, and you might want to show your hands just so that we can take a show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Keep your hands up, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. Okay. All those opposed?
7-5. Carried.
7-5. Carried.
That please. Thank you.
All those.
As in, I'd like my name recorded as
Yeah.
opposing it. Thank you.
Do any other members want their names
Anybody
recorded?
else want their names recorded? So.
Can we just Elder Johnston Wolf 4. Councillors 3, Elder Johnston and Wolf.
I think that's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
All those in favour of recommendation 3, please say aye. Those opposed? Councillor Elder opposed. Do you wish to record it? Yeah. All those in favour of recommendation 4, please say aye. Those opposed? Yes. Thank you. That takes us to the end of that. To the end of that paper. Moving on to paper 10. So Chakiwai Transfer, South Wairarapa District Council and Wellington Water Meters.
Meters. You said meters, Chair.
Oh, did I say? Kia ora, Ali, Julie, Amanda. Right, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. Kia ora, councillors. Good to see you all. So, first of 3 reports on Te Akiwai. Let's do it. So this report seeks council approval for a series of administrative but essential steps to enable the transition to our new regional water services organisation, Te Akiwai, from the 1st of July 2026. And this paper is put to you for approval alongside the next paper to come, which is the Te Akiwai Transfer Agreement. So please see that in that
context. As councils will be aware, Greater Wellington and the Metropolitan Councils have already agreed to establish Te Aki Wai to take over delivery of drinking water, wastewater and stormwater services across the region. As part of that transition, the shareholding councils of the current water entity, Wellington Water, need to begin to prepare Wellington Water for amalgamating into Te Aki Wai. This report progresses that transition by addressing two key matters: the exit of South Wairarapa District Council from Wellington Water and the subsequent amalgamation of Wellington Water into Te Aki Wai. South Wairarapa District Council has made its own decision to pursue alternative water service arrangements and will cease to be a shareholder in Wellington Water. To give effect to that, all shareholders must approve the buyback and cancellation of South Wairarapa shares in Wellington Water. This is a required legal step before any further restructuring can occur. The recommended approach, which is option 1 in your paper, allows the process to occur efficiently without requiring councils to directly purchase shares or introduce any additional complexity or delay into the transition process. Please note there will be some financial consideration paid to South Wairarapa District Council, but it will come from Wellington Water once the shareholding councils have approved the process. Paragraph 24 discusses the commercial terms of the buyback. Following the buyback, all 5 remaining councils will transfer their shares in Wellington Water to Te Aki Wai, after which Wellington Water and Te Aki Wai will be amalgamated into a single entity, with Te Aki Wai as the surviving organisation. This ensures a streamlined structure for the delivery of water services going forward. It is important to note that the decisions sought in this report are largely procedural. They give effect to earlier, more substantive council decisions to establish Te Aki Wai and transfer service delivery responsibilities. The financial implications for Greater Wellington are immaterial and no additional funding is required from council for the share buyback. In summary, approving these recommendations will enable South Wairarapa District Council to exit Wellington Water, the transfer of Wellington Water shares to Te Aki Wai, and the successful amalgamation of the two entities on 1 July 2026. I'm happy to take questions.
Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, team. What would happen if council did not approve these recommendations?
So, council, as one of 5 shareholding councils, needs to approve these recommendations for the exit, to authorise the exit of South Wairarapa District Council from Wellington Water and enable the amalgamation of Te Aki Wai and Wellington Water. So my read of this is if council decides not to approve this, then it stops things in its track. The process is effectively stopped in its tracks and we can't proceed with South Wairarapa exit and the Wellington Water Te Aki Wai amalgamation. It's pretty much as simple as that.
Any supplementary there, Councillor?
I guess I suggest that given South Wairarapa wants to get out, they would probably appeal to the courts if we did not authorise this.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Councillor Elder.
Can you confirm this comes at no risk and no cost to council?
So the risks and the costs are outlined in the paper, and I can confirm that, because this is all based on legal advice essentially. I can confirm that there is almost no cost and I can't see any risk. So I think it's procedural and administrative. So yes, I think it's a pretty safe assumption.
I'd like to move it.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Duthie, seconded by Councillor Connolly. Sarah, did you have a question or?
Yes, I will be asking if we can take these in parts.
Okay.
But I won't be voting for the entire thing.
Is there one recommendation that you're particularly
I will be voting for 1A and C Part 1, which is the selling back of the shares. I won't be voting for the amalgamation bit.
Mr. Chair, there's an executive summary and then there's also recommendations further down.
The recommendations on page 66 of my paper?
Yeah.
Which one are you?
Well, as long as the numbers are the same, I will be voting in favour of anything to do with the share reset, to sell back to South Wairarapa, but nothing to do with the amalgamation of Te Aki Wai and Wellington
Okay,
Water.
so this paper doesn't do the amalgamation. So,
Okay.
oh,
Am I ahead of myself?
No, sorry,
4.
it's number 4.
Recommendation
Recommendation number 4 is approve the amalgamation of Wellington Water.
Okay, so can I take recommendations 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? None. Those all passed. And recommendation 4 taken separately. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Me, and not to have it recorded, please.
Councillor Free and Councillor Elder opposed. Thank you. Paper passed. Right, main meal. Chakiwai transfer agreement.
Right.
In your hands.
Paper number 2, thank you.
I'm sorry, before we start, I'm sure you're going to cover this anyway. There are 3 new paragraphs which you've had circulated to you overnight. Those increase the scope of the, this morning, those increase the scope of the paper so that the conversation can be a bit freer than it might otherwise have been. What I'd caution you about is really bringing any sort of financial figures into this conversation, into your questions. But other than that, the scope is quite generous to have a free-for-all conversation. In your hands.
Thanks, Chair. Kia ora, councillors again. Right, so this report seeks your approval to enter into the transfer agreement with Te Aki Wai Limited, which is the final legal step required to give effect to Council's earlier decisions to establish a jointly owned water services organisation for the Wellington metropolitan area. So since, as Darren mentioned, since the report was written, officers wish to table the 3 new paragraphs relating to an overview of Te Aki Wai's financial position. And I believe they've been emailed to you. You might potentially want to put them on the screen. We'll just carry on. Yep, good. As noted in the paper, Council agreed in June 2025 to partner with the Metropolitan Councils to establish Te Aki Wai and subsequently committed to the jointly developed Water Services Delivery Plan, which was accepted by the Department of Internal Affairs in October last year. The transfer agreement before you implements those decisions. It provides for the transfer from 1 July 2026 of Greater Wellington's statutory responsibilities for bulk water supply, along with all associated assets, infrastructure, contracts, debt and operational arrangements to Te Aki Wai. This means that Te Aki Wai will become the region's water service provider, while Greater Wellington will move from being a direct provider of water services to a shareholder with an approximate 8% ownership interest. It's important to note that Greater Wellington will retain ownership of regional parks, water collection areas and river corridor land, consistent with commitments made through consultation, and will also retain responsibility for any decommissioned or abandoned water assets. Alongside the transfer agreement, you're also being asked to approve Greater Wellington entering into a number of enabling arrangements, such as interim land access and master and shared services agreements, to ensure there's continuity of service and a smooth transition from day one. From a legislative perspective, approving this agreement is necessary to meet the requirements of the Local Government Water Services Act and to give effect to the commitments Council has already made through the Water Services Delivery Plan. In terms of options, the report identifies approval of the transfer agreement as the preferred approach. A decision to delay would carry significant legal, financial and reputational risks, including potential government intervention and the inability to proceed with establishing Te Aki Wai as intended. In summary, this report represents the culmination of the work undertaken over the past year to establish Te Aki Wai and transition to a new model for water service delivery across the metropolitan region. Approval today will enable that transition to proceed on 1 July 2026. I'm happy to take any questions, as are the team here.
Okay, Councillor Free.
So I see this was received by us around 11 o'clock today, and we've been, of course, in workshops and then having a brief lunch. Can you please tell us why we needed to have these extra 3 paragraphs right now? I know, but...
So what those 3 paragraphs do... I
was trying to read the paragraphs.
So what the paragraphs do is extend the scope of the paper. so that we can have a conversation about this agreement in this paper, as well as potentially have it in an excluded paper. So you can have that conversation later on, but the public won't be part of that conversation. So these 3 paragraphs now open up the paper to be much broader and allow a conversation, which is why I'm just saying, try not to introduce financial figures into this, because while we have come to this approach, our fellow councils, other 4 councils, have not come to this. They're going to do everything in public excluded. They're not going to have any conversation in the public arena. So what I can say is that the things that are in those paragraphs are things that are in the public arena already. So nobody is being exposed here. They've been crafted in a way that we've used material that is already in the public arena.
But I presume that after, even if this next paper is to be handled in public excluded, that at some point it would all be made public.
Yes, correct. Yeah. Councillor Elder?
So I look at the legislation, and the deadline date is actually 1 July 2028. Can you confirm that the date 1 July 2026 is self-imposed?
I believe so, Councillor Elder. That was developed, that date was developed, and I can't tell you exactly when, but it was all agreed to through previous council decisions, as in day 1. I think it's in the Water Services Delivery Plan, and so day 1 was anticipated to be 1 July 2026.
But just for clarification, that's a collective decision,
Yes,
it's not
it's
a GWRC
No,
decision.
sorry, beg your pardon, it's a collective decision, yes.
So the flexibility does exist to defer that date to, say, 1 July 2027?
Yeah, it was a partners, I beg your pardon, it was a partners committee, or at the time the advisory oversight group decision to set that date, day 1 July 2026. So I just wanted to draw your attention to option 2, which was plan B, if you like, which talks about the potential to defer the decision from 1 July 2026. It carries a range of risks, and so I think those are covered in reasonable detail in the paper.
Any further questions on that? No? Okay, you do that first, and I'll come to Nigel C.
Just in terms of that date, yes, it's a self-imposed date. So the councils all agreed some time ago to be an early adopter of the local water done well policy. But that decision has been subsequently endorsed by many council decisions, such as when we went out to consultation and approval of the water services plan. So we have, so whilst that decision was collectively made that we would be an early adopter through the Partners Committee, Greater Wellington independently has acknowledged that position and subsequently approved it on many occasions.
But that date and that decision was made before the regional government, before the simplified local government reform came into existence.
Other questions? Councillor Saw?
Just a couple of questions. Mine's around paragraph 69, around the statement of work and the clauses A to H in terms of the services Greater Wellington's Roputaia will continue to provide for Te Aki Wai. Is that just simply to ensure that Te Aki Wai meets its drinking water standards, or are there other elements to those monitoring services that we will be providing? And I note that it says that that there may be additional SOWs that may be entered into, but is there a possibility that some of them may be removed or altered given the signal changes to NPSFM and the wastewater standards coming up and so forth, being introduced in 2 years' time?
Thank you, Councillor Saul. So we are still finalising this list of statements of work, and as you said, there may be more added. These are here partly because of the need to carry out activities in the water collection areas by, for example, biosecurity management services is basically pest control, and there are operational services that are carried out and the maintenance and management services. Those are services delivered by our parks team to enable or provide for the needs of Wellington Water at this stage, and these are still being finalised. Other services here relate to Wellington Water's compliance with its resource consents. So those are things that are still required. We are still to finalise things like forest health monitoring, but that's essentially to ensure that the work that's being done is delivering the result that is required. So, yeah, there's still a bit of negotiating going on, but this is work that goes on right now. The contract to provide these services expires at the end of June this year, so we have to have new agreements from 1 July with Te Ake Wai.
I guess this brings up the philosophical question that Councillor Elder raised, which is, and this seems to have been a feature of this entire process, is that things are still to be ironed out, and yet there's a self-imposed date. I guess at any point, and perhaps this isn't a question for yourselves, but more one out into the ether of what's the use of a self-imposed date if so many things still need to be put into place where those who are making decisions aren't entirely having assurance of the process? And I note that there's this stuff, there's obviously the long issue around stormwater. There's also some questions around the setup of billing at the point of where consumers in our communities are going to get that bill and how that is collected. So I guess I just want to understand why at no point this work wasn't sequenced to be realistic about its date of establishment.
I'm not sure that's an answer that the team can read. Yeah, I know you did, Councillor, so I'm just sort of reiterating. That's a broad range of questions, some around billing, of which we have no accounting for as a regional council in terms of how that billing structure that's been transferred from. I know, so I think, but yeah, I guess in terms of providing an answer to you, it's a difficult one for us or the team to respond to directly.
Okay, and then my next question is around, with the transfer of assets, there's in one of the attachments, hang on, let's see if I can get it. Yep. Around if this council decides to transfer the assets by the end of this month, that there needs to be audit sign off on those assets. I just wanted to understand how confident Greater Wellington is in the condition and performance of the assets we are handing over, particularly as Wellington Water has had known problems around its asset management, and what the implications will be for us handing over, choosing to transfer our assets over when other other shareholding councils' assets might be in quite a different state.
I'm not sure I necessarily understand what you're getting at with your question. Could you just...
Yeah, so basically, if we choose to transfer our assets over by the end of this month, there's some 15 working days for audit to sign off. Can you explain what that process is? So are we confident about the condition and performance of the assets that we're handing over? And then I'll start my second question.
Thanks, Councillor Saw. So yes, we're happy with the information around our asset condition. We're over that quite considerably. We have good information and that's been made available. Ali can talk a bit about the audit process that's currently underway, working with valuers and Wellington Water to bring all of that together and agree basically that we've all got the same information. Do you want to add anything to that, Ali?
No, just I feel like I'm saying what you said. The process is underway and in hand. Our valuation is slightly delayed, but I will work with the CFOs to make sure that that's still doable and it will be still within the 30 June deadline.
But overall, Greater Wellington has had a good history of reasonable investment in its assets and infrastructure. So what we're handing over is in as good a state as we can, balancing cost.
And I guess my following question is that, could you suppose that's the same for all other shareholding councils in terms of their assets that they're handing over?
I think that's been well documented throughout all of this process, that one of the considerable challenges included in our water services delivery plan across the whole region is that we have variable asset and infrastructure quality across the region. That's pretty well established, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Tupou.
Through you, Mr. Chair, is how many of our partners or TAs have already approved or ratified these such transfer agreements to Te Ake Wai?
Councillor Tupou, Hutt City Council's the only one that's already approved its agreement. All the other three are still to come.
Councillor Free.
The last paper I didn't, but collectively we did agree to merge Te Ake Wai and Wellington Water. Isn't that a reasonably significant decision? And how did that sort of pop into another paper when now we're looking at? I'm just thinking about the lack of clarity about this process, and as somebody said, all the funny little loose ends that we don't really understand. And why did we just approve? What did it really mean approving the amalgamation of Te Ake Wai and Wellington Water in the last paper compared to what this paper is trying to do? No, they're different, but just can someone please clarify this process?
We're drawing straws. Through you, Chair. This paper is about the transfer of our assets and our debt, and what services we're going to provide as part of that process to the new entity, and how the shareholding and financial support will work. It's completely separate to the Wellington Water aspect.
Yeah.
Yep. Councillor Conley.
I guess it's worth bearing in mind that the three papers we have on our agenda for Te Ake Wai today are all necessary to get across the line in order to enact Te Ake Wai. So the first paper, which was around the South Wairarapa shares and the transition of the shareholding, was very procedural. It was about the fact that we've currently got this entity called Wellington Water, which we are part of with the other TAs, and we're going to turn that entity into the new Te Ake Wai. So that was what that paper was about. This paper is about the transfer of our assets. So in those attachments, there are parcels of land, there are nuts and bolts, there are all the things that we currently own that we're going to give to Te Ake Wai. And then the third paper, which is currently listed as public excluded, is around the financial obligations we're going to take on in regards to setting Te Ake Wai up. So Te Ake Wai cannot go ahead without all three of those pillars being lined up. Think about it like a stool with three legs, and it needs all of its legs in order to stand up. And what's more, it needs all 5 councils to approve all 3 legs of every stool, otherwise it will fall over. So I guess the way the team has decided to structure the different papers, they could have been one paper, it could have been one gigantic paper, and I guess that's why I was supportive of the idea of presenting those additional 3 paragraphs, because they expanded the scope of this paper from just the transfer to also covering the financial instruments that we have to approve as well. Because although some of the nitty-gritty about the details of those financial instruments, there is reason to keep them in public excluded, the general principles behind our agreement of those those financial instruments should be a matter for public record. So they've been brought, so this expands this. As I say, that's just the way councillors have split it. I guess it's like staff allocation of work as well. They all of them have to be agreed in order to make this happen, and this is just the way the workload's folded and the papers have turned up. So apologies if it's not totally clear, but they are very much all connected. They are all things we need to approve before this can go ahead.
Okay, thanks for that explanation, Councillor Connolly. Any final questions, Councillor Macarini?
Thank you for the paper. I just have one question. It's kind of in relation to all the details that need to be ironed out, which seem to be quite a few and some quite significant ones. So my question is basically what options or recourse or whatever do we have if these details that are yet to be ironed out, let's just put it like that, significantly differ to our expectations and our standards. So if they essentially don't meet what we need them to a significant degree, what options do we have if we decide to sign the transfer agreement?
Thanks, Councillor. So if you have a look at current paragraphs 74 to 77, it talks about a wash-up process and the potential for mistakes, for want of a better word, is there. There's a lot to be. We're contemplating many assets, a huge list of assets and other matters to be transferred to Te Aki Wai. And so people have been working incredibly hard to make this happen and to get these schedules into as accurate a state as they can be, but there is still space for some things to be missed. And so that's why we've got this wash-up process that, if you say, it applies during an 18-month transitional period and allows for additional transfers to occur or the return of assets to councils if it's determined that either of those options is appropriate. So there is room to negotiate, but we have done a lot of work to try and make sure that the agreements are consistent with the transfer principles, and that's what we've used as our guide.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I and just want to mahi to you guys while I've got the mic, because that definitely the wash up process is good. What my question was more around, if in a worst case scenario there's a huge deviation away from some of those, is the wash up process enough for us to be able to kind of have some sort of recourse?
From a financial point of view, not the service level point of view, the process has been developed based on principles, and the CFOs have been meeting up to 2 or 3 times a week for many, many months to make sure that the way we've put this together and we have agreed the numbers, everyone's in line with what that is. Given the way it is being calculated and how close we are now to the 30th of June, and we're giving the numbers calculations as at the end of May, it is extremely unlikely that there would be any significant movement in any of the numbers at that point, because we have been agreeing and working with changes in forecasts as we have worked through the process. So I'm confident that there won't be any significant movement. The main movement we've had in the last couple of months has been reduction in Wellington Water forecast for capital delivery. So that just means a little bit less work in progress goes across in the assets and a little bit less debt for for all the councils involved, actually.
Okay. Councillor Connolly, do you have a...
Yes, so I have some additional recommendations to consider, and it looks like Democratic Services is sharing those. This is a complete list of things we might want to include. I just thought it was easier to include everything and then we can strike them out if we don't want them on the page. Actually, while some of you have got the paper, one of the additional clauses I have included relates to Pakratahi Farm, and this is one of those wash-up matters that I just wanted to put some belts and braces around, because we have had commitment from Te Aki Wai in terms of their treatment of Pakratahi Farm, but I just wanted a little bit more reflection of so Quentin's asking me to explain a little bit more about Pakratahi Farm. Are you okay with that, Chair?
Yeah.
So Pakratahi Farm is land that we have, it's actually closer to Kaitoki than Pakratahi, that we have purchased for water storage purposes, and there are plans underway to put large water storage collection areas similar to what there are at Te Marua in this parcel of land. We acquired the land using a Public Works Act process, and Mana Whenua have expressed to us that they had an interest in the land. So we talked with Te Aki Wai about transfer of the land and whether it was appropriate for us to give the land to Te Aki Wai as part of the transfer process, given mana whenua's interest in the land. Te Aki Wai made an undertaking that they would abide by our obligations in relation to our Te Tiriti policy in offering any spare land back to mana whenua after they'd identified what they actually needed for the storage lakes. And also we'd already identified that it would be useful to use that bit of land to connect Pakratahi Regional Park with Kaitoke Regional Park. So we want to make sure that that is also provided for. So in informal conversation, Te Aki Wai has indicated that they are happy with both of those, and we've also got communication which Shamia might like to talk to, Councillor Makarini might like to talk to, between mana whenua and Te Aki Wai, that they are happy with this arrangement as well. Unfortunately, it hadn't quite got to the process of writing the exact terms and conditions down on paper and signing them. So I've just put an additional clause there, which is at 14, to agree the transfer of the Pakratahi farmland is dependent on satisfactory agreement being reached between GWRC and Te Aki Wai regarding safeguarding an ecological corridor with eventual public access, so that contiguous pathway between the Kaitoke Regional Park and Pakratahi Regional Park is secured. And 2, Te Aki Wai agreeing to uphold Greater Wellington's Te Tiriti policy obligations to provide mana whenua with first right of refusal on any land deemed to be surplus to water service purposes. Do you want to comment any further on that, Councillor Makabe?
No, not really. Just to support what you said. So, I mean, the good thing is that our mana whenua partners, being Taranaki Whānui, also are Te Aki Wai partners, so they've got their own kind of partnership relationship that they're able to work on. But I understand that there was a strong commitment from Te Aki Wai to further discussions directly with their partners in Taranaki Whānui, which iwi indicated that they were quite comfortable with. So that was helpful. But at no time I think we didn't kind of drop our partnership responsibilities, and the commitment directly from Te Aki Wai to us as Greater Wellington is also that they will uphold the same Te Tiriti responsibilities. So I think it's quite a good situation.
So in terms of the other additional recommendations which were provided from 9 to 15 in blue, there's some either or options depending on where the council would like to land. And then there is a recommendation at 15 that I know some people did not support, so we may have to move that independently of the other. Well, we'll probably have to do it all one by one, which will take us a while.
So can I put my 2 cents worth in on this? In recommendation 13, I think the second recommendation covers the fact that we want to meet, and I don't necessarily know that we need to lay out all of that detail. That's just a personal preference. And in 15, I think that is all materially accurate, but I'm neither here nor there about whether we actually need to say it or not. So I'll leave it at your hands about how you frame up those two for the final. Because what Councillor Connolly is doing here is moving everything as one. So the original recommendations that are in your paper now, and then the ones that are in blue. Councillor Wolf.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm just thinking this is a really important issue, and I'm wondering if at some stage you might like to consider abandoning standing orders so that we can speak more than once.
Well, it depends. Let's get the motion on the table.
Sure.
Speak once at least, and then we'll work out whether you need to speak again. But we can do that. We can suspend the standing orders if we need to.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
In light of that, I would like to move from the attachment that you've received, recommendations 1 through to 8, and then I would like to additionally move 9, 10, 11, 12, and the shorter version of 13.
Hang on, just let her put the motion on the table.
Oh, plus motion 15, and I will move motion 15 as well, recognising that might not have support.
And 14?
Yes.
And 14. Okay, so we now know what the motion is. We'll call for a seconder in a minute. Councillor.
Sorry, can you go through that? It was 1 to 8 and then...
So it's just, I'm moving it all, except for recommendation 13, I'm moving the shorter version rather than the longer version.
Before we get a seconder, you've got a question, Councillor Elder?
I'm not sure what the correct procedural process is, but to be presented with a whole new range of recommendations and notes at the last minute without time to duly consider them is wholly unacceptable. I would like to know whether it is procedurally correct that we can actually go forward in this manner.
The through the chair, the recommendations in the report are simply officer recommendations. A member has the liberty to move recommendations that may align with the officer recommendations. They may have additional content or be quite different, and that's at the discretion of a member. So they're not, and that it's always useful for that to be foreshadowed to members before the meeting, which was the case done here. But alternatively, a member can move motions at the time of the meeting. So there's no procedural issue with that in this context.
Okay. Any other questions about procedure? Any other questions? Okay, do you have a second?
So I'm just adding in an extra word after consulting with my colleague, Councillor Makarini.
Okay.
Can I just ask a quick question
Yes.
to Councillor Connolly? So we're going with the second version of 13, which is quite different because asking the rest of the Partners Committee to also be part of the delegation. So that is the intention for the Partners Committee to go as long as they agree as well.
I think that would be absolutely the best outcome. I'm unconvinced that the Partners Committee will agree to such a delegation, and as such, we may have to come back and have a further conversation about how we proceed.
So that wouldn't preclude the chair of the Regional Council reaching out to the same people and inviting them in here to have a conversation about, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Fine.
Councillor Saw.
I just had a question on recommendation 14, just some clarification of, is it to uphold Greater Wellington's Te Tiriti policy obligations, or is it just our Te Tiriti obligations? And is there any settlement implications with this particular whenua?
I might have to look for staff and Councillor Makarini to help me out, but I purposefully chose to use the words Te Tiriti policy obligations because we have, I guess, translated what Te Tiriti means to us in terms of our obligation when we're disposing of land. And so that's quite clear that we must consult mana whenua in this circumstance. So it's really clear through that policy what our obligations are. And so that makes it really clear what we're talking about. I guess Te Tiriti, has been interpreted different ways by different people.
So can I just clarify, Tanya, do we have a Greater Wellington Te Tiriti policy adopted by the council? Because otherwise...
No, it's an operational policy adopted by ELT.
Right. So in that case, it really is Greater Wellington's Te Tiriti obligations, not its policy obligations, yeah?
I was looking for you this morning.
Okay, take out the word policy.
And then there was my question of, does this whenua, is it covered under any settlement?
No.
Okay, cool.
No,
and I'm happy with that wording.
We purchased it subsequent to the treaty settlement. Yeah. If we'd held it, it probably would have been, yeah. Okay. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Saw. Okay. Do you wish to speak to the paper?
Yes. So my involvement in water in Wellington goes back a long way. I worked at Capacity back when it just represented the two hut councils in providing water services. And then my involvement when I got involved in the Upper Hutt City Council was in Wellington Water, as it had then become. But there have been challenges with this model for a long, long time. There have been multitude of things that Wellington Water has done wrong and not got right, and we've all criticised from the sidelines, be it fluoride, be it leaky pipes, be it more points. But at the end of the day, the way Wellington Water was set up was not set up for success. The separation of owning the assets, along with the separation between that and the operational decisions, has never meant that that whole of life costs could be considered. And so it's time, I think, that we change that. We've all heard about the rationale for the local water done well, which stems partly from what happened in Hawke's Bay a decade ago, which showed that 20% of New Zealanders who got reticulated water did not have access to clean or to water that met quality standards. So we have a problem with our water in New Zealand, and certainly we have a problem with our water in Wellington. The situation in Wellington is pretty dire. We all know the headlines. We all know the experience we see when we drive down the road and see geysers popping up. But did you know that there is one bit of wastewater pipe down by the Basin Reserve that predates the Treaty of Waitangi? So that is the kind of network we have. It is really, really old, and it has not been maintained properly for generations. And there's a massive catch-up that is now needed. And that catch-up is going to be hard, and that catch-up is going to be painful. And yes, Te Aki Wai, or the move to Te Aki Wai, is going to impose considerable costs on Wellington consumers. But those costs don't stem from the structure. They stem from the assets. They stem from the poor state of our assets. They stem from the fact that 40% of our drinking water goes down the drain. They stem from the fact that 3 out of 4 of our treatment plants are non-compliant at any one time. They stem from the fact that we still discharge poo into rivers, into lakes, and into our fresh water. And it's time we got to act together. And this is the vehicle that the government has chosen for us to do that. It's not perfect. It's been an arduous process over many years. And so I'm extremely grateful to get here today to put this paper to you. As you say, there are many, many things that we could have done differently and we could have done better. But altogether, I'm really proud of the work that the team has done and that I've done alongside them. And I think that this will deliver better water services for Wellington in the long term. And I think our grandchildren will thank us for making this decision, even if our children don't thank us. Thank you, team, for all your work. And it has been a learning experience working with the other councils to get to this position. As I say, it's been a group effort. Maybe not what I would have chosen if I'd gone alone, but we've had to go together with the other councils, and we've landed in a space that we can all live with. So I look forward to seeing what the future will bring, and I really hope that it brings water security and an improved environment and high quality drinking water and stormwater protection from flooding, etc. So these are the things I hope, and this is the vehicle to deliver on that. So I hope that you will support the recommendations I've put in front of you today. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Connolly. Councillor Saul, do you wish to?
I'm reluctantly seconding these recommendations because, and to echo some of Councillor Connolly's comments around we've got to do better, and this is the only vehicle we've got to do it in. I do want to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work Councillor Connolly has done to represent Greater Wellington's position in the establishment of Te Aki Wai. I'd also like to in turn acknowledge the clear communications and the frank feedback we would get from Councillor Connolly. I'd also like to acknowledge our staff and our officers for the leadership, the information, and I guess support of the direction that successive councils have had around this particular establishment. I don't think this is going. I admire Councillor Connolly's optimism for this new vehicle. I am, on the other hand, somewhat probably had the optimism kicked out of me a little bit, and I think our region could have done a lot better for water. And I feel that this is a minimum viable product. But as someone who is sitting here as a decision maker at this point in time, it is the least worst option we have in front of us from what was presented to us originally of an entity that would understand the fundamental sanctity of water, of which we all rely on, as well as the affordability that challenges that we have, as well as the upgrades that we need that have been neglected for a long time. I think this is probably about the minimum viable product we can have. It is my hope that the future entity does take heed the concerns and the aspirations of what the shareholding councils want for this. We're essentially putting all our communities' FPOS cards on the line without them really having a choice on how the money's spent and what the result will be. And I wear that responsibility very heavily, but I look back at the past sets of governors over decades who've done a far worse job. So I will be voting in support of these recommendations, but it is somewhat with bated breath.
Okay, other councillors. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Firstly, thank you to the officers for your mahi, to Roz again for your leadership, and also colleagues. We've discussed this at length and debated it, and I particularly like to thank the new councillors for their input. I'm really uncomfortable. Te Akiwai is seemingly a done deal with many complex unquantifiables. Risks are there if we go for it, and there are risks are there if we don't. The impost on ratepayers could be unsustainable, and that's a biggie for me. But the letter to the partners from Will Pete on behalf of the directors gave some comfort, but far from complete comfort. As per the last vote, I'll be making my decision after listening to the rest of you and in debate, and it will likely be within a fine margin. I'm really pleased that this discussion is taking place in public. I'm the way that we've handled this to get us to this stage is really impressive, and I would urge you, if you do have worries, queries, or concerns, and you want to bring them up, this is the time to do it. And that's the reason that I asked the chair if he would open it up, abandon standing orders at a certain stage so that we can have that opportunity to speak after having listened to each and every one of us if we want to. So, I'll leave you with that.
Thanks, Councillor Wolf. Councillor Elder, Duthie, and then Johnson.
I would like to thank Councillor Connolly for the amazing amount of work she's done in leading this project for the council over recent years, and also to the officers for the incredible hard work that they've done, particularly Amanda. It's been more than just a labour of love. However, in saying that, I will be voting against this for a couple of reasons. The first one primarily is that in adopting this model, we are effectively giving away all democratic control of water services in the Wellington region, but retaining all of the liability for shareholders. That to me is completely unacceptable, particularly when there's so much uncertainty and complexity around what happens post-transfer. We only get one shot at this, and if we don't get it right, there's no going back. Secondly, at the time this was all set up and agreed to, the amalgamation of Wellington Region territorial authorities was not known. We didn't know that simplifying local government would be forced upon us. And by still trying to conform to that transfer date of 1st of July 2026, we're putting unnecessary pressure on ourselves, on the organisation, without knowing what the region will look like beyond that date. Having looked at the legislation, there is opportunity to actually delay or defer. Yes, it will make people uncomfortable. It might come with some extra cost, but we would actually be doing the region and the ratepayers a great service by slowing down what we're doing and making sure we get it right. So I will be making sure that when I vote against this, my name is recorded, and I would ask you to look to your conscience to see that you're happy that your vote is recorded in public. Thank you.
Councillor Duthie, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank Councillor Connolly and all the officers that have done all the work behind the scenes. I think today we grapple with the consequence of political choices made over decades in the way we have set rates. We collectively, across all councils in the Wellington region, have set rates and made our political priority choices that have generally ignored the depreciation and need to maintain, renew and upgrade our water infrastructure, a lot of which is underground, out of sight, out of mind. And unfortunately for the 4 cities of the Wellington region, the pigeons have come home to roost. To my mind, water services are a fundamental core public service, and as a member of the public said at a public meeting that I spoke at and got shouted at, safe drinking water and good systems to take away our wastewater and deal with our stormwater so it's not in our lounges is simply essential for life, for hygiene, for health. But these systems, these networks in the 4 cities of the Wellington region are severely degraded, and we're all suffering, the users of water, ratepayers, the economy as a whole, and the environment. Which should not be forgotten that many of our water systems are actually designed to pollute in ways that are completely unacceptable today. A Black Creek in Wainuiomata is an example I often use, where the wastewater network is simply designed to have manholes that pop off in the rain and flow raw sewage down the stream. That's simply how the wastewater system was designed. And we have to design our way out of those sorts of situations as well as fix the infrastructure deficit. I'd just like to note that much of the responsibility for this infrastructure deficit actually falls on territorial authorities and around the reticulated drinking water network, the wastewater and stormwater. However, Greater Wellington is not immune because we, in our bulk water function, we extract too much water from our rivers and we leave them in a precarious ecological state in a dry summer. And so while we need the TAs to fix all the drinking water leaks that is causing that 40% to be wasted, we also need to invest in new storage lakes to be able to ease the pressure on our rivers and have that dry summer surety of water, security of water supply. And as I understand it, Greater Wellington cannot afford to do that alone, and that is where Te Aki Wai, as a body that can borrow more, can enable that investment to happen. So I don't think the cost of remedying this situation is avoidable. It is the cost. It is the problem that has been created that has to be solved. But I am concerned about the financial risk to councils and ratepayers. It's alarming. It may have an impact on councils, not just us, to actually provide other core services because we are shouldering a burden of a financial guarantee and call on capital facility. And it will be very hard for many of our ratepayers to afford the water services over the next 10 years. We no longer have financial separation between councils and the water entity as was envisaged in the government policy and was we went out to the public with in our public consultation, and we simply do not know if the public would have supported this proposal if that had been on the table when we consulted in it. Maybe not. The missing piece, to wrap up, the missing piece in my view is central government support for the ratepayers of the Wellington region, recognising not just the cost and the risk to councils and ratepayers, but the fundamental importance of this infrastructure, and to have our capital city and its satellite cities on its knees for water infrastructure is just not good enough for the nation, and there is a national benefit and a national risk that is being ignored at the moment. So to sum up, I don't think today's decision is wine and roses by a long shot, but I do think it is the best option we have, or you could look at it that it's the least worst option we have. However, I do think it needs to be supported, and I will be voting for it today. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor Johnson.
It's already on. I think you've said most of what I want to say. I do think that we've got a Clayton's choice, really. We have no choice but to proceed. And as Quinton says, I actually think some of this has to be shot back to the government and the choices the government has made. We can't do much about previous decisions made by councils. They have been warned for 50 years about this infrastructure and chose not to do anything about it. our ratepayers are really very unhappy, which is why I want this in public, because I think we're agreeing to something because we really have no choice. And it's not that we don't recognise the pressure that our ratepayers are on. You only have to open your social media and you just want to die inside. And I feel for the councillors that are getting the blame, including Phil's wife is getting a pretty tough time at the moment. It is not her fault either to be in this situation. The problem we have with ratepayers, though, is it's not in my backyard. And so my point is not in their backyard if you live in Porirua. So they have a tendency to say, it's not my problem. Well, it is all of our problems, because it could have happened to us as well. And I think it's really important that we do all the things that actually have been set out to actually say this isn't a good thing. What I'm worried about in the future is the economic impact. I spoke earlier in the day about the loss of 20,000 people out of Wellington City. That's 20,000 and rising. The people that I talk to, my generation, are now talking about leaving to Australia. Why are they going? Because their kids are going, because their grandchildren are going, because it's not affordable to stay here anymore. And the amount of conversations I'm having with people across the generations is really quite distressing. There used to be a saying in the 1970s, the last person out of Wellington, turn off the light. I feel that that's where we're heading. The second point I want to make is back in my chamber days, there was a lot of talk about privatisation in not Anglicans, leave them out, Anglian water. And there is still talk about that we will try, pass this over, and 10 years down the track, we're going to have another play for privatisation. That may sound really dire or impossible, but it is all possible under whatever government you have. That really worries me, that future is still a possibility. I feel I have no choice but to support, but I am pretty damned worried about the economic future, our ratepayers, our affordability, and we're sort of screwed, really. But we're doing the best. But lastly, I just want to acknowledge Ros. I think we'd be in an even worse position if it hadn't been for your leadership and your work and your ability to actually stand up for yourself, because it's pretty easy to be mowed over.
Right, Councillor Free.
Yeah, I've really appreciated listening to everybody, and also want to thank Ros. I really appreciate the way in which you brought us back information and always been very patient with questions. I do agree that this is a Clayton's choice, and it's just a question of which way you go on it. I have never voted for this in my entire career when I was on the City Council, nor when we had the opportunity to vote earlier last year. So I think I will be consistent and vote against this. And yet I appreciate that I'm able to do that, knowing that other people will probably vote for it. And so we will have a way forward, if you can call it a way forward. I'm personally extremely unconvinced it's going to deliver anything much different from what we've already got. And I think if councils had been left alone or given even a little bit more support, we actually could have worked our way through some of our infrastructure problems in a different way, while keeping our infrastructure assets, or maybe just even seeing Wellington Water working a tiny bit more efficiently and effectively. However, it seems that the region collectively, well, 4 of the TAs collectively have decided that this is the way forward. I think the government should be doing a bit more for Wellington. We had a massive earthquake in 2016, and we do have data that says that from that time on, the leaks in Wellington actually accelerated. So it wasn't obvious straight away, but year after year, there were just more and more things that broke and leaked. When Christchurch had an earthquake, they had billions invested in their city. They had infrastructure replaced. When Wellington had an earthquake, I think we had one building that we were able to claim insurance for, and maybe there were a few other minor bits and pieces. But as a city, we ended up having to pay to fix our own water infrastructure, to fix things like the Central Library, to earthquake strengthen masses of buildings following higher earthquake strengthening, and to build our own convention centre, unlike Auckland and Christchurch that got help with that. And I actually think the ratepayers of Wellington have been amazing. And I'm really sorry that I think that we're going to make your lives more difficult collectively by having to suddenly put rates up a lot. And that is the reality. I just hope that the city will truly benefit from it, and it'll become, an even more amazing place to live. In some ways, I do agree this is almost the worst of both worlds, in that the whole idea of this was meant to be financial separation, so that the new entity could actually run itself, not have political influences, make business-like decisions, and actually be able to call on capital to fund what it needed, and also have a pool of expertise that was bigger than what any individual TA could provide. But what's actually going to happen is councils are still going to be underwriting this, are still going to own the assets, are possibly going to have very, very little control. I can only hope that if this goes through, we do get decent asset management plans, that there's a whole lot more transparency about what needs to happen, and that the expertise will be there to manage to prioritise it so that the most important things get done. But I have to say, at the moment, I'm not sitting here with a whole lot of confidence that will necessarily be the case. So I'll leave it there. And just to note too that I won't be voting for clause 15. I think that, it's already been said, we could have invested in more water storage. I can't forget about the fluoride debacle. And yes, we know Wellington Water should have been over some of this stuff, but I think that, for Greater Wellington to sort of be congratulating itself for not being part of the problem is actually not particularly helpful at this point in time. So I will not be voting for 15. I think it's a little bit on the nose for us to be congratulating ourselves at the expense of perhaps some of the other partners in this.
Okay, Councillor Tupou.
Mr. Chair, like colleagues around the table, I was elected with a clear public position in favour of water reform. And this has been consistent throughout my local government career. I supported Three Waters because of our storm, waste and drinking water networks failing after we know decades of underinvestment. And the evidence of generational neglect was undeniable. The coalition government's decision to retract Three Waters halted that progress and created uncertainty. Despite this, as a TA Hutt City Councillor, we continue to lead with pipe renewals and targeted investment. My community elected me knowing my stance. They expect me to stay the course and to remain consistent. I thank Ros for her leadership throughout this process, who I first met through the Whaitua process for Te Whanganui Ataran. That was really, for me, the first exposure to our water issues, the leaking on private properties through to publicly owned assets, and the need to track those. I acknowledge and respect the concerns raised by colleagues. They are thoughtful and valid. And if the government wants local water done well, it must hear our concerns and understand the risks. And so, Mr. Chair, we must finish the race and see this through. Therefore, I will vote in favour of Te Aki Wai transfer agreement. Kia ora.
Other councillors? Okay. Before you do, I'll have a few words myself. Difficult decision for all of us. Been a long time coming. Suboptimal in many respects, but I sort of do feel that there is a need to move on with reform and attempt to do this better for the metro area than we have clearly been able to do collectively over the last 30 years or so. Ros, to you, congratulations on a massive effort, keeping your hand in, staring down in arguments and what have you around this sort of stuff. I know it hasn't been easy. It's been at times a damn thankless task. But you have held our end up, and I think you can get that clear indication around the table today. I suppose my one concern, well, not one, but my major concern just at the moment is having signed off with one more paper to go, all of these papers, there is a question about how we do keep involved in the future on behalf of our community. From Councillor Elder to a number of you, you've all made the comments that we are. The community is now removed effectively from this model, and it's basically an 0800 number is the best you're going to get. And I think we probably need to find a way by which the community can be better connected into the system, and by which we can represent them in the system. So those are my comments at this stage, Councillor Connolly.
So I won't drag this out too much longer. Everyone has said all the things. This is not the place that we might have hoped we would land, but it's probably the only valid choice that we have in front of us. To err at this point would be an incredibly costly and risky exercise. So as Councillor Tupou said, we must stay the course. The one thing that I did want to say, and I've thanked a lot of people, and without Amanda and without Ellie and without Jacob and without Julie, this we wouldn't have got to where we've got. But the other people I wanted to thank was the other councillors around the table. This has been an incredibly long and arduous and complicated task. It's involved engineering, it's involved asset management, it's involved finance, it's involved our mana whenua relationships. It's really run the gambit of issues that local government is involved with. And you've all stayed engaged in the topic and across where we've landed. And I might not agree with everyone's position here, but I really appreciate the fact that you've been involved and you've helped me shape where Greater Wellington has come to in this position. So I'm just really grateful to have such a great team backing me, and hopefully that will continue into the future. So thank you.
So I propose to take them apart from the noting recommendations that come a little bit later. I propose to take all of these one by one. So, all those in favour of recommendation 1, say yes. Those opposed? 2, 3 and Elder. Yep. So who 3 and Elder. Recommendation 2, all those in favour? Those opposed? Councillor Free. Recommendation 3, all those in favour? Those against? Councillor Free. Recommendation 4, all those in favour? Those opposed? Councillor Free. Recommendation 5, all those in favour? Those opposed? Councillor Free. Recommendation 6, all those in favour? Those opposed? Councillor Elder and Councillor Free. Recommendation 7, all those in favour? Those opposed? Councillor Free. Recommendation 8, all those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed? Councillor Free. Recommendation 9, all those in favour? Those opposed? Unanimous. Recommendation 10, all those in favour? Recommendations 10, 11 and 12. Can I take those as a collective? Yeah, 10, 11 and 12. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed? No. Recommendation 13. All those in favour, please say aye. Those opposed? Okay, unanimous. Recommendation 14. All those in favour, please say yes. Those opposed? None. And recommendation 15. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. Carried. So it's carried. Paper passed. Thanks, councillors. Do you want to take a break? After the break, you'll be led by Councillor Conley. Yeah. She'll be right on the next paper on Saturday. She's got a
Right. I believe we are up to item 12, is that right? Variation to the Wellington Regional Land Transport Plan, and we've got Grant and Friend to take us through. So if you could do some introductions, that would be great.
So kia ora, councillors. This is Emma Hope, who is the author of the paper, but she's in the process of transferring friends. So, teams. So more than just a friend, actually colleague. So the purpose of this paper, as I've stated out, we're asking the council to approve a variation to the Wellington Regional Land Transport Plan to update the scope and description of the activity State Highway 1 Second Mount Victoria Tunnel and Basin Reserve upgrade. This reflects the NZTA's board-approved expansion of this project to include duplication of the terrace tunnel and associated State Highway 1 improvements. The variation has been identified as non-significant for consultation purposes, as the activity's priority, ranking, strategic intent, and overall cost envelope remain unchanged. The Regional Transport Committee recommended adoption of the variation at its meeting on 31 March. And if approved, the variation will be forwarded to the Transport Agency for consideration in the current National Land Transport Programme. So this is essentially an administrative requirement under the Act. The RTC, if there is a variation to the Regional Land Transport Plan, or if there's a variation to items which are covered in it, then they need to be, there's a case to vary the Regional Land Transport Plan to reflect the true scope of activities. Just going back through this and just to touch on it, what this essentially does is it puts in scope work which NZTA has already conducted and consulted extensively on, puts that into scope for the Regional Land Transport Plan. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for the team? Yes, Councillor Duffy.
Good afternoon. In the Regional Land Transport Plan, the current cost for this project is listed at 1.9 billion, I think. How does that compare to media reports that the cost for the State Highway 1 tunnels improvements is sort of more in the 3 to 4 billion ballpark?
So the original, through the chair, the original figure of 1.9 billion will have been what NZTA estimated at the beginning of the RLTP process, which is a number of years ago now. The figures that are reported inside by the media are those which have been updated following the project. And I would just add that for the current period of the RLTP, there is no variation in the cost. It's in the out years. So what this variation is altering is the scope inside the current 3-year period, and there's been no change to the overall dollar value. There would be a change there's actually no change in the 6-year period. The changes would be in the 6 years and beyond period, which is outside the scope of this change.
Any further questions? Councillor James and Councillor Makari.
Yeah, just a question about, like you mentioned, as administrative and stuff essentially is ticking it off for inclusion in it. I guess I just don't understand why NZTA decided to kick off this administrative process. They already fund it through their NLTP, and then this informally has to go back for them, the board now, to consider the thing that they changed the scope of, which they've already been funding through an NLTP, to then whether or not it should be funded through an NLTP. It already is. Why? Why are we doing this?
Because in this instance, and this was NZTA who initiated it, there is a natural change in the scope. When the RLTP was agreed, endorsed by the RTC and agreed by this council, it specifically referred to Basin, State Highway 1 and works along Vivian Street. The scope has been expanded, and for planning purposes they need to amend the scope to reflect what is actually happening.
But they don't. It's in the NLTP already to fund the State Highway 1 improvement projects that were included in the GPS, regardless. Anyway, it's not for you to consider. So thank you for the paper, and I'll shut up now.
Yeah, I guess the answer is bureaucracy. It's a statutory process we have to follow. So, Councillor Makarini.
Kia ora, thank you. I've got two questions that you may or may not be able to answer, but if you can't, that's Kate's why. So I just note that mana whenua have been engaged in the project development and the optioneering processes, but does that actually include this change? Is the first question.
So through the chair, yes, it does include this change. So the development of this particular project was done through the National Maori Technical Advisory Group, which is the advisory body into NZTA, and they have engaged with local mana whenua and iwi groups.
And second, related but not really question is, would you be able to confirm for me that the affected residents of the expansion, so obviously this changed the scope a bit, have been consulted with or been talked to?
Through the chair, so that's partly over and above what this particular kind of administrative tick box exercise, if you want. But they were, so at the end of last year, around November, there was quite an extensive NZTA consultation undertaken with those members who would be affected by this change. And there's been quite a few previously through the Let's Get Wellington Moving and other kind of projects as well. So there's quite a body of evidence that's existing, which is partly why we've recommended no consultation, because I think the people have already had the opportunity to have been heard.
Anyone further? Oh, sorry, Councillor Free.
Yeah, I just wonder if you can elaborate on the statement that the cost envelope, the scope's changed, but the cost envelope will remain unchanged. How's that likely?
So through the chair, the current RLTP, they are in the investigation and pre-implementation. So that doesn't change. It's the planning work that they are doing. So that doesn't change. Should the project proceed into construction, yes, there will be a change to the overall cost envelope, but that's estimated to be out beyond the 6-year mark.
Okay. Oh, Councillor Saw.
Cool. I just had a question, mate, again, probably summarised by the fact it's statutory and bureaucratic, so no point asking it, but it was around the officer's consideration around significance, and would this project affect the integrity of the RLTP, including its overall affordability? How does a project that has a BCR of 0.7 to 1.2 not impact on the overall affordability, or have I misread this paper?
So through the chair, it needs to be taken that this is a rewrite of what was put into the Regional Land Transport Plan in 2024. So effectively, this is kind of replacing that line item in that document, which was from 2024 to 2027. So it's as similar as what was consulted on in the Regional Land Transport Plan that went for consultation in 2024. And it's just replacing that. And it will likely be in the next version of the Regional Land Transport Plan, which will go for consultation again in 2027. So if you think about it, this particular kind of rewrite really is only until the next Regional Land Transport Plan comes out, which should be by mid next year. It's very administrative.
Which does beg the question why we're doing it at all. But let's put these recommendations and move on. So we've got 2 recommendations to adopt the changes, the variation, and then the second one is to send them to Waka Kotahi. I'm happy to move those. Would someone like to second them?
Can we do them separately, please?
Okay. We certainly can. I need a seconder first. Everyone's super enthusiastic. Councillor Free. So I will move motion 1, adopt the proposed variation. All those in favour? Yes. Anyone against? No. Okay. Can you raise your hands so that can be recorded, please? Do you wish to have your names recorded? Sure. Yes. Okay. And James, yes. Motion 2 agrees to send the adopted variation to NZTA. All those in favour? Anyone against? Councillor Duthie. Excellent. Okay, let's move on now to the next item, which is a shareholder resolution regarding cost of professional membership for directors of WRC. So Sarah is going to introduce this paper for us.
Kia ora koutou. This report seeks Council's agreement to authorise Holdings to contribute to the costs of fees to professional membership bodies for its directors. This is a shareholder approval required by the Holdings Constitution. There's been no changes to the report since it was written, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Sora.
Such a dumb question. What did we used to do before? So I read the paper, but it would just be good if you could articulate again what the need for the changes, and to I guess what is the perceived benefit of this when I believe we have quite a rigorous process to appoint suitable directors. And my third question is, how many professional bodies are there for directors to join?
Yeah. Through the chair, what has been done before is it actually hasn't come up as something that had been thought about before. It is anticipated with the Constitution, which is why clauses 40 and 41 are there to enable this with shareholder approval. The need is, I guess, as Holdings is reviewing its operating model and its strategy, it has been identified that some of the directors would look at taking up membership of professional bodies such as the Institute of Directors, and that they may benefit from that in the performance of their duties as directors of Holdings. I'm just trying to remember your third question.
How many other professional bodies are there?
I am not aware of the number of professional bodies. However, I would note that if the shareholder here was to approve these resolutions, it would still be subject to board approval. So where it's identified that it's beneficial for the holdings company, and so it would be very specific to the types of professional memberships, such as the Institute of Directors. And while it's up to the board to make that subsequent approval, I would note that the board would be likely to either set an aggregate or a cap, sort of per annum per director. So it's not just you're not just giving a blank check.
Any further questions? No. Cool. Okay. Would someone like to move these recommendations then? Councillor Duthie, and second them. Councillor Macarini. Is everyone happy if I put them all together? Okay. I will put all four recommendations. All those in favour? Anyone against? Carried. Excellent. Now we're getting some speed. Okay. Next item number 14, appointment of members to the Regional Transport Committee. I don't know that we need anyone to speak to this. It's clearly just changes in the individual TAs, and we're just reflecting those changes through. Anyone have any questions or happy to move? Councillor Duthie and Councillor Johnson is seconding that. I'll put all three of those motions together. All those in favour? Carried. Excellent. Okay. And the next one should also be reasonably simple. Item 15, Local Government New Zealand Annual General Meeting. We are approving that Councillors Elder, Ponta and Tupou, as well as our Chief Executive, attend, and that Councillor Ponta is the presiding delegate, and that Councillors Elder and Tupou and the Chief Executive are alternates for the voting. Lucky them. Discussions on this? Yes, Councillor Free.
Just one question. Will there be any other staff that you're that might be going?
Not usually. People can go if there's a particular need, but typically it's 2 or 3 councillors and the chief executive, which is reasonably represented around a lot of the other councils for this particular conference.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay. So I've got 3 recommendations. Would someone like to move those? Councillor Wolfe and Councillor Elder is seconding. All those in favour? Oh, sorry.
President, just for the sake of councillors, could we just clarify the difference between the LGNZ AGM that we're approving here versus the conference, which has been moved from July to October? What are we actually approving here? Is it conference or the AGM?
It's the AGM, so even more fun. So I guess it's just attendance by Zoom, isn't it? It's not actually.
It's going to be held online.
It's going to be held online, so it's virtual attendance. Lucky you. But then I think the same people were going to go to the actual conference which has been moved now to later in the year.
But the recommendations only refer to the annual general meeting, but not the conference.
Yes, that is correct.
So shouldn't we be also approving them to go to the conference?
I can answer that. That's not the practice of this council in accordance with the sensitive expenditure policy elected members. Attendance at the conference is approved by the council chair. It's a separate process.
So I guess this is the thing that you need formal delegation in order to vote for. The other one is more of a professional.
I was more like we're paying people to get to have a little trip away.
Yeah. So is everyone happy with that, with this process? And understand we're just voting on attendance at the AGM, which is just virtual, not actually travelling anywhere. So I've got movers and seconders for those motions. All those in favour? Anyone against? Carried. Excellent. Okay, now we're back to some substantive matters. So is this you, Nigel, the Greater Wellington Q3 summary report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It is me. Look, this is the regular report you can use to now. This is Q3. The only thing I really want to reflect on, and we can have questions noting the time. If people want to email me questions directly or GMs, you're obviously we welcome those. Just wanted to reflect on the storms in February, which were quite unique really for this region, and certainly some parts of the region unprecedented, and the response from our Emergency Coordination Centre team and also the Emergency Operations Centres across the region. It was the first ever state of regional emergency declared, and people from this organisation involved in numerous aspects of that response, including in ERCs and other parts of the region. And it was a very good thing actually for the region to have gone through. There's obviously a tragedy in terms of the loss of life and major impact, but when we look around the rest of the motu, it's been a little while for Wellington to get hit in the way that we did, and I think the response from the REMO and Civil Defence Emergency Management side of things, including the mahi of this organisation, was very, very good, and we will learn a lot of the post-event debriefs, but it's not often we have an event like that, so I thought that was just worth noting briefly, Chair. Other than that, the executives here, as am I, if you have any immediate questions.
Any questions for Nigel or the rest of the team? I might kick you off then, which I was going to ask a forward-looking question, even though I know that the report is clearly backwards-looking. But in terms of achieving the KPIs that you're measured against and that Greater Wellington's performance is measured against, are you worried about your ability to deliver on any of those, given the amalgamation and the other kind of, the amount of work happening in a number of reform spaces?
Thanks, Chair. That's a good question. I'm not immediately worried about it, but what I would note is that the workload on all local body organisations, we're just having a debate today around local water done well, and you will understand how much work that's taken. It's actually taking people out of their substantive roles to go into other parts of the organisation temporarily. You're aware of what's happening in simplifying local government, around our involvement on that and some of the executives, and then the backfill for that. So there is an enormous amount of deep system change work, which does require a lot of input from staff, not to mention the RMA reform mahi that's been on for quite some time. So I would say there's pressure in the system across local government, and quite how that continues to unfold is yet to be known. So there's pressure. I feel that what you're seeing in the report today fairly reflects what the current state of play is in terms of whether some of these are at risk and will be delivered or not. Some of them are clearly not yet measured, so that's something that will come through in the final quarter. But yeah, it's a good question, Chair, and it is fair to say local government is under a lot of pressure.
Does anyone have any other questions? Councillor James.
If no one else does, I'll be very quick. Probably can't answer this, Nigel, so I might have to follow up the Metlink team after, but I see the NTS status is still in red for the major projects. It's about a year until we're supposed to schedule to roll it out. It's been red for a number of quarters now. Just starting to get pretty concerned about what's going on there. But again, we can take this offline.
Yeah, look, I'm sure Sam and Tim will be happy to talk about that just in terms of a high-level response. That is the similar reason it's been on red for quite a while. One is timeframes and the delivery. We're getting, we're reasonably confident we're on track, but there's also fiscal challenges as well with the whole program that relate to both us and the program generally speaking. All I can say is give you as much assurance as I can that this organisation and Metlink is in constant contact through the various structures of the NTS, right through up into conversations I have with my regular one-on-ones with the chair of NZTA. The issues are known, and we're doing our very best to manage them.
Councillor James's question obviously sparked something, because I've now got questions from Councillor Saw and Councillor Duthie.
Mine was actually on that page as well, around the ICT strategy, and I guess just a kind of request for that to sort of come up through FRAC if possible, and if what risk exposure do we have with that piece of work behind being a little bit delayed?
Turn to Julie for this one, thank you.
Certainly very happy to come to FRAC with that, a bit more detail on that. The overall ICT strategy is aimed at removing technical debt, so our legacy systems and spreadsheet type stuff, and moving more onto the cloud. Some of the delays that have led to us being red are mainly because technology's moved on, so those things are no longer needed, and we've had to reprioritise internally in terms of our efforts and put more effort in other places where it's needed more. So we're doing a bit of rebaselining to actually just reevaluate. It's been 3.5 years since we set the original intent of that strategy, and in the tech space, obviously that's quite a long time, and so some of those things are no longer needed. So while it looks like we're falling behind, we're okay with that, but it doesn't look like that here. That will be revised over the next short while, because we've been having those conversations over the last couple of months about what will progress. So in terms of the risk, we're pretty comfortable that we're actually taking a risk-based approach and focusing our efforts where it's needed most, and not progressing things unnecessarily. It's also debt funded, so if we don't spend the money, that's actually a good thing, so it doesn't actually incur an impact on rates if we don't do that work. But certainly very happy to bring that to FRAC.
Thank you. Councillor Duthie.
Mine was the same topic, so I just need to attend FRAC to learn all about it. Thank you.
Any further questions? No. Yes, we have a recommendation to accept the Q3 performance report. Would someone like to move that? Councillor James and Councillor Johnson seconding that. All those in favour? Anyone against? Carried. Excellent. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the FRAC Committee Chair's report. You can stay in your seat, councillors. Oh, you've got helpers, no?
No, just me.
Just you.
Everyone's leaving. It's so boring. Everyone's leaving. I'll take the report as read, but just some quick highlights is that our forward work program has been changed and updated because it's looking forward to reflect some of the changes that we're dealing with across the organisation, externally and internally. In terms of the quarterly finance update, notable that our debt and reserves are within the range of our relevant Treasury policy guidelines, and our update on our social procurement strategy. There were some issues raised around whether some of those broader outcomes are affordable for some of our suppliers. In response to the quarterly finance update, we've put a request for officers to come back to separate our CapEx overspends from our external projects from our internally managed ones, so we can get a bit more detail on whether our internal controls are okay with our CapEx versus ones that we're in an alliance or in, at the hands of externals. And what else? We have engaged audit. We have a new auditor whom the independent member and I have met with. So there's some particular focus areas for... one thing I learned about audit is that Audit New Zealand has now gone back into the functions of the Auditor General. So they've gone through their own restructure. And so now the Office of the Auditor General has brought back in Audit New Zealand, and it is now the Audit Office. And they're pretty across what's happening in our sector, and their focus for local government is around value for money and some of our, hang on, I've written it down, and our sort of strategic financial management, but they're well aware of some of the financial decisions and instruments that we will be having to make decisions on, and how that will impact on our own headroom, and what implications that will have for future levels of service. And just in terms of health and health, safety and wellbeing, a new WorkSafe Act will be in place by the time we have our next meeting, and that will have some implications and impacts on how we do things in that space. But happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Saw, for that exhilarating audit update. Does anyone have any questions of Councillor Saw? It was a really useful FRAC update. Great, thank you. Any questions for Councillor Saw? No, and I don't think there's any recommendations to approve there either. It's just for information. Excellent, thank you very much. And on the same exhilarating topic, Ellie is going to give us the finance report for March. Ellie and Ashwin.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, councillors. So the paper presents the financial results of the council for the 9 months ended March 2026. The full year forecast numbers have been updated with the main drivers explained in the report. We are now expecting a slightly higher accounting surplus as compared to before. Overall, some key points. The Lindrum underspend is a combination of a few different factors. So one is the contract was signed a bit late after the original budget was approved. We have got some built-in contingencies in the project, and there are some general delays in the project as well. Farebox revenue is under budget mainly due to rail patronage. The bus patronage has improved due to the fuel supply issues. On the fuel supply front, from a cash flow and a finance perspective between now and end of June, we are okay. We can manage the situation quite well. But there are some issues with public transport, and those will be monitored quite closely. For the full year, we are expecting a funding surplus of just under 2 million, which is after the public transport deficit of around 7.6. And it's very likely that the public transport deficit will be debt funded, and we will be bringing a paper to the council in the next month. The capital spend is mainly driven by two main factors. One is water assets, which will be handed over on the 1st of July. And the second is Riverlink, but that is mainly because of some timing issues, and we will be looking at carrying over the budget over the next year as it ramps up the activities in the next year. I'll take the report as read, and we are happy to take any questions.
Just one correction, sorry, Ashwin,
Yeah.
the report will probably be August once we've...
Sorry, that's the report into how we will deal with the deficit.
Sorry.
Any questions for Ashwin and Ellie? I have a question then. So, we had the discussion earlier in the day. It seems ages ago now, but it was only this afternoon, regarding additional provision for diesel cost increases. But we are still seeing, we're still predicting a lower than forecast public transport patronage, and that is a theme now that has run for a number of years. Is there anything we should be doing from a finance perspective? Like, we may have been saved this year, for want of a better word, by the fact that the fuel crisis has come along and we've seen an increase in patronage, but you've identified that only brings us up to, well, not even quite where we were forecasting we would be. So should we be looking at reduced services and more increased fares to compensate for this, given we're multiple years into seeing deficits in the public transport space?
I think this is the type of review that we're looking to do in the LTP process, yes. Of course, you have agreed to a slight reduction in the revenue, but fares revenue budget for 26-27 in the paper earlier.
But I guess the message is that things are not so dire that we need to take emergency action at the current point in time.
Correct. The forecast shows at the moment a 7.6 million deficit, funding deficit, so that's our share in PT, and we only have 4 million left in reserves. So we will need to have a conversation about that once the figures are finalised post financial year end.
Thank you. That's kind of sobering. Councillor Duthie.
On the same theme, we decided to introduce the fare rise earlier. I think it was even this week. So then, how much will the increased fare revenue between now and the end of this financial year offset some of that? Or just materially, is it going to offset that, or is that built into the expected $6 million fare box revenue shortfall?
To be honest, I'm not sure if it's built into the June numbers, but we've only got really 6 weeks, so it won't have a significant impact. What is helping us from a cash flow perspective that we can see in the Treasury is the increase in numbers has increased the cash through the door. But as I said, we were already well below budget, so although it's improved performance, we are not exceeding budget at this point.
Any further questions? No. Report is so comprehensive. That's just for noting as well, just for information. Excellent. Thank you very much. So that brings us, I believe, to item 19, which is resolution to exclude the public. So we have two substantive items for public excluded. Centreport guarantee and the debt guarantee and uncalled capital facility for Te Aki Wai. So part of the intention of widening the scope of the previous Te Aki Wai conversation was that people would still be comfortable holding this paper, the debt guarantees and uncalled capital facility for Te Aki Wai, in public excluded. Where are people landing on that? Do you still wish to have a debate on whether it's held in public excluded? Yes, Councillor Duthie.
So prior to that scope change of that earlier paper, I was planning to debate the resolution to move into public excluded for that first Te Aki Wai item, but I feel like we have had a good debate in public earlier, and with the financial questions on the table in sort of big picture terms, and so I won't be doing that. So.
Excellent. Are people generally comfortable then if I put the resolution to exclude the public? I'll need someone to second that. Councillor James. Speak now if you're not. Okay. So I'll move that motion. All those in favour? Aye. Excellent. If there are any visitors or visitors online, it's your time to exit.